Good morning, happy Saturday. It is a few days after release for the Doom Boss, and the meta is still kind of in flux and changing all the time. But there are some clear frontrunners for options regarding spec weapons and melee punish mechanic weapons that are definitely really, really good, and some that are not so good. And I've been getting a lot of questions about, what should I bring? What makes the most sense for me? And there is not a one-size-fits-all solution completely, and I will explain what I mean by that when we take a look at the different options. But depending on what type of player you are and how deep you want to push things, I think there are better and worse options for your individual case that are not necessarily going to make sense to be universally applied to every player. I don't think there's one best option for every single person, and I'm going to explain in a little bit what I mean by that and why that's the case. And you can be the judge of whether or not you agree with my analysis and think that it makes sense or not. But I'll present to you some options, and then I will present to you some types of players that I see asking about this content and what I think makes the most sense for you. Let me know in the comments if you guys are, having fun using one spec weapon or another. I think that as long as, it feels like you're doing good damage and you're enjoying farming, that is by far good enough and you should enjoy it. But if you're interested in the numbers and my perspective on what I think might be the strongest for you, then let's take a look at them together. Okay, so for the purposes of our little analysis, this is the general gear setup that they're going to be running. It's basically like your BIS range to get that last max hit from your T-bow. So you'll be running Missouri helmet, and we are going to take a look at the scythe, the chally, the duel, Mac Daddy, bopper, the dragon knives, the ZCB, and the claws. And we're going to kind of break up our discussion into the melee punish mechanic versus your 100% accuracy range punish against the Roomba phase, because the melee specs are not good for the Roomba phase, and the range specs are obviously not good for the melee phase. So we kind of have to compartmentalize the way we're going to look at this and the way we're going to discuss it. And I'll discuss more later on that not every type of player cares about either one of these punishes to the same degree. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a little bit. But these are going to be the setups. Setups, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, left to right and top to bottom. So let's take a look. So on the left here, we have the melee punish phase. He prays range, he prays melee, and you go in and you get a big hit with something. Your best DPS is the scythe, and although it does not have the biggest max hit, by nature of the fact that if you are good enough to not lose ticks, you can go in with the scythe, you can get still a very, very large hit, and then you can have your T-bow and your range switch back on 5 ticks later and get ready to be T-bowing or SCO-bowing again, whatever you're doing. So it's still got a big, big hit, and you're not losing all the ticks that you would lose from the chally. So the scythe pretty clearly wins out as the best DPS option. However, it is 1.6 bill. Not everyone has that. So your other extremely strong options are the dual Makahedal. Those also have a very large max hit and also do not suffer from the extremely long attack cooldown of the chally. Burning Claws, kind of the same deal. They still have a decent max hit, and they also don't have a very long attack cooldown. The biggest max hit here is obviously the chally. However, you're going to be in a very, very long attack lockout afterwards. So when do you care about this? When do you not care about this? If you are a player that is good at hitting your switches and being where you need to be and not losing ticks, you're not going to be favoring the chally as much because the attack cooldown is just too long. Still a very solid option. It does a lot of damage, but if you have a scythe or the boppers and you're good at making use of your ticks and you're not wasting time, they're going to be a stronger option for you. They're also way, way, way more expensive. So if you're in a position where you don't have any money and you're also not a player that can like make use of every tick perfectly, the Chally is a very strong option. I know a lot of people are saying it's the best thing in the game. It's definitely not the best for the punish. A lot of people are saying it's completely useless. It's definitely not completely useless either. There's definitely a subset and niche of players where the Chally is probably your best option. So it's definitely not like troll to be bringing it. For the range punish mechanic, that's what we have over on the right. This is your 100% accuracy on the range phase. You basically have two very strong options. You've got the ZCB and you've got the Dragon Knives. One of them is obviously super expensive, and the other one, relatively, even though they've gone up like crazy, you're not paying 500 mil to use Dragon Knives. The ZCB is definitely better. Every time you get that Roomba phase, you get a 100% chance to just get a 110. But the Dragon Knives are doing crazy good damage too, especially for their price. And if you're at a point in the fight where you don't necessarily have, 75% spec to send on the ZCB. So the ZCB is your best option, but the Dragon Knives are still extremely strong. And so which one of these you care about more will depend on this question. And you need to do this analysis for your own gameplay and ask yourself this question and be honest about it. Which one of these players are you? Are you someone who's pushing, wave 8 and onward consistently? Are you someone that is just farming the early waves, like you're comfortable doing 1 to 4 or 1 to 5, and that's where you really start to struggle and become inconsistent? And are you an early wave farmer, but you're also further restricted with a really low bank value, or you're on an Ironman and you don't have access to all these items? The answer to this question is going to ultimately be the answer to what spec and what punish weapons you care about bringing, because the optimal DPS across the board as a blanket does not exist for this fight. You will care more about one of these mechanics versus the other based on what type of player you are within this paradigm. If you're someone who's pushing deep delves 8 and on consistently, you don't really care much about the melee punish mechanic. You probably have a scythe, and that's your best option, and you should bring that. And on the rare cases where you see the melee punish mechanic, like, the first few waves, your scythe is doing great damage, and that's fine. You're not going to be spending special attack on the melee punish because you're doing so much damage that you're getting through the early waves quickly. And in the later waves, you're not seeing the melee punish mechanic anymore. You don't care about it. It almost never comes up. If you are player B, you care about the melee DPS punish, and you will rarely see the Roomba phase because you're farming the early waves where the Roomba phase does not exist. And the melee punish mechanic, if your DPS isn't really good and you're not clearing the waves like insta, you're going to see it over and over again, and it's going to start to matter more to you. So you will want to have options that punish the melee mechanic, and that's where you can spend your spec energy. If you're player C, you care about the same thing that player B cares about, but you don't necessarily have access to all the items. So if you're player A, you're a deep delver, you want ZCB. You do, because what you care about is the Roomba DPS check, because you are trying to skip the crystal orb phase. You're trying to do as much damage as you can during the Roomba phase so that you don't have to flick 7 attacks and time the ball and walk with the shield and worry about the grubs and worry about the slam. You're trying to beat that. So you're saving your ZCB for the Roomba phase, and you're trying to push through that as fast as possible. So you're going to be running ZCB and Scythe. That is your best option. Or you're going to be running Dragon Knives and Scythe if you don't have access to a ZCB. That's still very strong. I don't believe it's quite as good, but it's still very good. If you are player B, and you are an early wave farmer, if you're at a very high bank value, but you're just not very comfortable with the mechanics yet, and you're not pushing deep, you might have access to a ZCB and a Scythe. And if you do, great, you should bring it. It's it's still really fucking strong. You can start every wave by doing 110 damage, and then you can punish huge with the scythe when the melee punish comes up. So that's what you should bring. If you don't have access to those things, you don't have access to a ZCB, you're probably not seeing the Roomba phase very often, so it's not ultimately that big of a deal. You can bring Claws, or you can bring the Boppers, or you can bring Chally. They're all strong options. I would be bringing probably the Boppers, and if I wanted to have some fun using a spec weapon, I would bring a Chally. If you're player C and you're an early wave farmer, but you just don't have access to all these fucking weird wild items, you got a low bank value. If you've got the Boppers, the dual Mac Yoddles, bring them. They're very strong. If you want to have fun and spend some spec energy, or you don't have access to the Boppers and you only have the Chally, bring the Chally. It is a super easy weapon for every iron to get. If you're a main, you can spend 750k on it and have it. It's a very strong option. It's not the best thing in the game. It's not fucking breaking the meta wide open, but it is definitely not useless. You can do a ton of damage with it. For its price, it is an insanely good option. So that's how I am going about giving advice and analyzing, who should be bringing what. It's not that straightforward. You have to do the analysis of what's prudent for you in your situation based on the mechanics that you are going to be seeing most often and that you care about. What are the choke points for your run? Deep delvers need the DPS check on the Roomba phase. Early delvers never see the Roomba phase and care about the melee phase more. So you just have to do this analysis and see where you end up. Hopefully this makes sense. Some of these values might not be exactly correct with respect to Gearscape. I did my best to be thorough about what modifiers were active and not, but Gearscape is very complicated, and when these new things get put into the game, every so often there's just some weird hidden aspect that isn't calculating quite right. So take these numbers with a big grain of salt, but hopefully this analysis makes sense and maybe clears up for you what player you are and what you care about in these runs and what you can focus on. And obviously, as you improve and your needs change, just modulate your gear setup accordingly. I will mention that for the melee punish mechanic, you care most about getting your melee strength bonus in multiples of 5. So mess around with your gear to get a reasonable threshold without giving too much up. If you're at 69 melee strength bonus, maybe fuck around and see if you can get to 70, because every interval of 5 you get another modifier on that hidden DPS that you're doing for the melee punish. So mess around with it. There's no one size fits all solution. You got to see what makes the most sense for you. Have fun delving, and I'm wishing you guys very good luck. I can't get shit from this boss, so hopefully you guys are getting some good drops. See you later.